Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is brought to you by your daily English dose. If you're tuning in to sharpen your English skills by, getting to grips with major global news, well, you're definitely in the right place. Today, we're doing a really important deep dive. We're looking at the renewed tensions between the US and China, and honestly, things have gotten much more aggressive lately. This isn't your standard trade spat anymore. Our analysis points to October 2025. Around then, the whole game just shifted dramatically. We're talking about a huge struggle now, focused on what experts are calling strategic resources and core national security. So, our mission today, to break down this really complex fight for you, make it clear.
That's exactly right. You see these headlines, and they throw around terms that can be, well, pretty tough to grasp on the fly. You want to make sure that by the end of this, you feel like you really understand what's going on. We'll define those key words clearly for you, like tariff. That's essentially just a tax, often a high one, on goods coming into a country. And decoupling that word described this process of forcefully separating two economies that used to be intertwined. Getting why these two major powers are fighting now, understanding that shift. That's really the first step to mastering the news in English.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this.
Okay.
So, for years, this US-China thing was mostly about money, wasn't it? Trade deficits, IP theft, who can make stuff cheaper. It felt like it was all about the price tag. But the data we've looked at suggests the focus has totally changed. Can you walk us through why? Why did the argument move from, profit margins to controlling these basic industrial areas? What really caused that pivot?
Right. Well, it wasn't really a slow drift. It's more like a fundamental switch.
Yeah.
Moving away from pure economics and landing squarely on national security.
Yeah.
I think countries basically realize that having cheap consumer goods is great, but it doesn't count for much if you can't guarantee the survival of your key industries long term. And this strategic shift brought two main weapons into play in this modern trade war: tariffs, like we mentioned, and the control of strategic resources. And these aren't just any goods. The big ones right now are these special minerals called rare earths, or as they're known sometimes. If you've got a smartphone, or maybe you drive an electric car, an EV, or if your country has, advanced military hardware, you are absolutely dependent on rare earths.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the light bulb moment was realizing that controlling the raw materials for all our modern tech,
Yeah.
that gives you immense leverage, way more than arguing over the price of, I don't know, t-shirts. It makes total sense then that protecting that supply chain suddenly became more important than just keeping trade cheap.
Precisely. If one country essentially controls the foundation of manufacturing the actual minerals and the tech to process them, that's a huge geopolitical advantage, a massive one.
Okay, so here's where you said it gets really interesting. Let's zoom in on that trigger moment. Early October 2025. What exactly did China do that provoked such an extreme reaction?
Yeah, the Flashpoint. It wasn't just China saying, we're limiting rare earth mineral exports. That would have been big, but this was more sophisticated, more strategic. China announced stricter controls on the export of rare earth technology.
Wait, hold on. The technology, so not just we won't sell you the dirt, but we won't sell you the instruction manual for how to clean the dirt and make it useful.
Exactly that. That's the crucial detail here. China started regulating the know-how, the actual knowledge, the processes for mining, separating, refining these critical elements. And this seems specifically designed to stop other countries, think the U.S. and its allies, from building their own independent supply chains, to keep them from competing. They're holding on to the intellectual capital.
But, how fast could the U.S. realistically find its own rare earth sources and build up that whole complex infrastructure anyway? Is controlling the tech really more powerful than controlling the immediate supply, at least in the short term?
Well, long term, yes. Arguably, controlling the technology is more powerful because it just makes it so much harder for anyone else to even get started. It raises that barrier to entry way up. And the U.S. reaction, it showed just how seriously they took that move. Immediately, the threat came back. A massive 100% additional tariff on Chinese imports, a direct retaliation for that technology restriction.
Oh, 100% tariff. That literally doubles the price overnight. That reaction was so fast, so severe. It really confirms what you're saying. Touch strategic resources or tech, and the response now is extreme trade retaliation. Maximum pressure. It's not a negotiation tactic anymore. It's like an economic knockout attempt.
That is absolutely the shift we're witnessing. The clear implication is, and if you mess with our industrial base, our critical tech supply, we will use tariffs not to tweak prices, but to just shut down trade altogether.
That sounds completely unsustainable for how global business usually works. If tariffs are hitting 100%, maybe even higher, They're not really a tax anymore, are they? They're just a weapon. So let's talk about how extreme these tariffs have actually become.
Right. And this is where we really see decoupling that psi concept taking hold. The goal shifts from coexistence, however strained, to actual separation. You're the extreme talk like Donald Trump's proposal for a flat 60% tariff on almost everything from China should he return to office. Now, 60%, that's not about adjusting prices slightly. That's clearly designed to just force Chinese goods out of the U.S. market, period.
Right. To help our listeners picture what decoupling means, it's maybe like imagine two roommates who shared everything, groceries, rent, the lot. Now, one roommate has completely moved out. They're setting up a whole new apartment down the block, buying all new stuff from different stores. It's a total break, not just, moving the couch.
That's a really good analogy, yeah. And this isn't just hypothetical talk either. The data shows the U.S. has already put tariffs as high as 145% on certain specific products.
145%.
When the import tax is almost 1.5 times the original cost, well, trade just stops. It's financially impossible. You can't sell those goods in the U.S. That is forced decoupling. It's happening right now.
And China's response, they have their own countermoves, obviously. They push their retaliatory tariffs on some U.S. goods up to 125%. But here's the part I found really fascinating. China also started suggesting they might just ignore any further U.S. tariff hikes. I mean, ignoring the world's biggest consumer market, doesn't that just tear up decades of global integration? That sounds like a massive, dangerous gamble for the whole world economy.
Oh, it is. It's a profound shift. That strategy to ignore further tariffs. It signals that, from Beijing's perspective, the U.S. market is now just too politically volatile, too risky to rely on. So they seem to be actively pivoting their focus. Instead of getting bogged down in endless tariff fights with Washington, they're looking inward, boosting local consumption and also expanding regional trade, especially within Asia, focusing on trade blocs like RCEP. They seem to be accepting this long-term decoupling from U.S. economic dependence and building new trade networks that, frankly, bypass the U.S.
And the targets for these U.S. tariffs have gotten, well, surprising too. Often they use Section 232 of U.S. trade law, which is supposed to be about national security, right?
Correct. But that definition of national security has been stretched in ways that genuinely shock supply chain professionals. Originally, it was for core materials, steel, aluminum, things clearly linked to defense. But now, it's expanded to cover derivative products, things made from those materials. For example, those aluminum tariffs, they got applied to things you would just never expect. Research shows that back on April 4th, 2025, those tariffs were actually extended to cover imported beer and empty aluminum cans.
Wait, beer cans. Empty beer cans are a national security threat now. Are we worried about the strategic reserve of imported lager?
It sounds kind of absurd, doesn't it? But it really shows how broadly that security justification is being used now. It seems like it's being applied to protect almost any domestic industry that feels pressure from imports. And it didn't stop with cans. In June 2025, big household appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, they got hit with tariffs too. It shows how political and how wide-ranging the national security label has become.
Okay, so let's shift from the big picture geopolitics down to, practical business survival. If you're running a multinational company and you've got this constant threat of maybe a 145% tariff hanging over you, how do you even operate across these two giant economies anymore?
It forces a fundamental change, a complete rethink of the business model. Companies are now actively adopting what the supply chain folks call the twin factory strategy, sometimes called geographical duality. It's basically admitting that the old model, one single integrated global supply chain, is, well, it's dead.
A twin factory. Hold on. Does that literally mean a company has to build and run two totally separate production systems, like one factory and supply chain just for the U.S. and maybe allied markets, and a completely different one just for China and its regional partners? That sounds incredibly expensive, inefficient.
It is extremely expensive. Massive restructuring, huge new investments are needed, but it's seen as the only reliable way to manage this level of risk now. Think about a company making complex electronics. For the product heading to the U.S., they absolutely must source all their components from places like Mexico, India, Vietnam, maybe Europe, non-China sources. Because if they try to mix in even one critical part made in China into that U.S.-bound product line, the entire finished item could get slapped with that crippling tariff. It forces companies to sort of pick a side much earlier in the process. Sourcing, manufacturing. The cost of setting up two systems is high, yes. But the potential cost of getting hit with a 145% tariff, that's seen as far, far higher. Bankruptcy level risk for some.
So this business strategy, building two separate economic worlds, this is basically pushing the global economy towards what you called block economization. Does that mean companies just have to choose sides permanently, even if they'd rather trade everywhere?
Increasingly, yes. That's what block economization points towards. Trade flows more and more within blocks, either U.S.-aligned countries trading with each other or China-aligned countries trading internally. That relatively free global flow of goods we got used to, it's being replaced by these trade silos, and it's being driven by political risk and the use of these really extreme tariffs as weapons.
Okay, so to quickly summarize today's deep dive for you, our listeners, the big fight between the US and China, it's now mainly driven by security issues and, let's be honest, domestic politics, not just traditional economics anymore, and tariffs. They've gone from being a simple tax to becoming actual weapons designed to stop trade cold.
Right. And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. Even with these super high tariffs flying around, China seems laser focused on controlling the technology, the actual know-how for critical resources like rare earths. If they control the blueprints for the future, how much is that strategic control going to affect huge global projects like the big push for electric car batteries for decarbonization, that sea effort? How will that play out in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a huge question. It really could define the next decade of global trade and tech development. We really hope you learned some useful, simple English terms today. Words like tariff, decoupling, strategic resource, and maybe that new one, twin factory strategy. Try to review them, maybe use them when you talk about the news. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this analysis helps you make better sense of the world's big stories. And don't forget to like and subscribe to your daily English dose. We'll catch you on the next one.